Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 11:11 this morning. We appreciate you tuning in and being a part of our talk as we are just answering a lot of questions and we're just looking at a lot of different avenues when it comes to death, when it comes to our final days in preparation and all the things that we do. Today we have Jonathan Stilwell with us today. He is from John M. Oakey in Salem, and he's going to be discussing and talking about, and if you have one of our lists, you'll see where it says on Friday, April 22nd, what I want and how I want it. This is called preparation. So we're going to be talking today about the preparation process. And I hope that you get a lot out of this today, and I hope that you will continue to support us. Next week, we'll be here at 11:11 again, and if you want to come and be a part of it live, that's more than welcome. But Jonathan, how long have you been in the funeral business?
Yep, so total, from playing the piano and everything, going on about 10 years.
10 years.
Four of those years I've been a licensee.
So okay.
Just long enough to be dangerous, I suppose.
Okay. Put the mic up a little bit closer. And when you went in the funeral business, what was, and I use it as a business, but I don't really mean that,
Sure.
but what was in your heart when you started, when you felt you was going this direction in your life as a job?
Yeah. Service. I love and adore being called to help and to serve others. I think that in many ways that encapsulates a ministry.
Right.
And I'm so very proud of that.
Okay, good. Well, Jonathan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to ask you to put that mic up there.
You're going to have to remind me several times, Gary.
Yeah, and I'm just going to let you recap what we'have been talking about, and then I'll let you go right into what you want to share today. And I may interrupt you and ask a couple questions, and then after we get off the air, we're going to have some people ask questions here with us today. So
sure.
I'll just turn it over to you, Jonathan.
All right. Well, first off, thank you for having us. Having myself. Second, I know David did it last 2 times, but I certainly want to just make mention that I don't necessarily represent Johnny Mokey and Son, but the funeral service as a whole. Common goal is preparing for end-of-life decisions. I believe we kind of briefly discussed that earlier. In the first session, we kind of talked about why think about it, or David gave 3 kind of really good ideas as far as stewardship, ownership, and then peace of mind as to why to think about these things. Last week, it was the topic of the decision of disposition. So you had the traditional or casketed service, if you would, cremation or anatomic donation.
Right.
So today, what I want and how I want it. Or wishes and preferences. And this is probably one of my favorite parts of preparation for funeral services, memorial services, what have you. Just a few open thoughts, if you don't mind. If you're so inclined, write these thoughts down. Make sure that they're known with someone, somewhere. Make sure they're recorded.
Okay.
It's fine to think about things, but if nobody knows, it's sort of losing my train of thought there for a moment, but just need to make sure that it's known.
Right, right.
Second, I would also recommend keeping that written down portion with other important documents such as insurance information or Social Security number, education levels, those sorts of things. Because those are all important when it comes to finalizing death certificates and things like that when all of this comes into play.
And matter of fact, just to interrupt you a minute, next week we are going to be talking about finances and what it costs and all the costs and why funeral don't have to be expensive and why it is expensive and how you can cut costs and all that stuff too. We will be looking at that next week. So.
Yep. Always more to come, right?
Yes.
So now let's catch up and really get into today. And briefly, these are just some common things that we always talk about with folks whenever they come into the funeral home to decide to talk about pre-planning or just kind of making things known. At the top of the list, you've got to make your decision of what method of disposition you were wishing for. If you're going to be buried or if you're going to be cremated, those sorts of things. Now that you've decided on that, let's kind of describe what...
Is there anything that we need to think about when we decide on that?
Well, kind of yes. It depends on what your tradition is.
Talk to the people.
Depends on, a lot of times it depends on a spiritual sort of mentality, what your theology tells you.
Okay.
Other times people just kind of go with, I did it because that's what my mom did, or that's because my grandfather did that. So that would be a recommendation there. But in describing what your funeral looks like, and I do an air quote with that because your funeral may look like, laid out at the funeral home for 52 nights and having a big funeral at the Catholic Church downtown, or it may look like taking your cremated remains to your favorite little fishing spot with, your close immediate family and just remembering. So I kind of air quote that, and whatever that means to you. Kind of coming down the list here that I prepared, I often hear that when a death occurs, we had no idea where to begin. And so hopefully this is going to alleviate some of that.
Good.
And then I also hear that I didn't know we could do that. If you can want it, it can just about be done. Kind of coming down, food for thought, I suppose, Brother Gary. How should you look if you decide that you're going to have, your body present for your service? Ladies, we need to think about cosmetics or hair or jewelry. Men, how did you comb your hair? Those sorts of details.
I don't have to worry about that, John.
Well, what way you wax your hair.
Okay, wax
kind
it.
of
Okay.
wax the head, Is there a particular outfit that you would like to wear? Some folks go out of this world dressed to the nine. I've kind of made my mother swear that she's going to put me in shorts and a T-shirt. So, it just depends on what you prefer. Some other thoughts that I had, is there anything that might need to go with you, such as a blanket or a photograph or your favorite book, a Bible? Sometimes I feel like those items get missed when we're thinking about services and things of that nature. Jewelry. You can wear your favorite pieces of jewelry or your wedding bands and so forth, and then we can return those to you after the service or before the casket is closed, before we head to the cemetery, what have you. Thinking about the service itself, if you have one, who's going to sort of be the ringleader of that? Do you have a minister or someone to speak, a family member, to sort of lead that? Music for the event, if there is one. And this was sort of important to me. Brother Gary knows I'm a musician myself, but you would be surprised at what is deemed appropriate. Sort of in a more, this would be what I would consider more of this is a sacred space. Funeral home, we're able to get by with a little bit more because we want that to be an open and inviting space to everyone. So, if you like Creedence Clearwater Revival, let's whatever your favorite song is, let's go with that. Or if it's
Jonathan, I got to share with you. I just did a funeral the other day at another funeral home, and they had a song played, and they asked me if I would approve it, and I said, it's fine, whatever you want, and that's what you're saying. They played, Let's Have a Beer with Jesus.
Oh my gosh, I think that's
The words were tremendous.
really.
The title is horrible, but the words were awesome. And what it was I need to sit down and talk to Jesus a long time. That's all it was.
Huh.
But the title was, let's have a beer with Jesus. If the title wasn't there, the song was very appropriate.
Okay.
But the title wasn't. But they did play that, and it was very well receptive.
That's wonderful. Whatever it takes to reach, right?
Yeah.
So some more details about the service. Do you want a photo slideshow? That's something that's becoming very popular. And what I appreciate so much about having slideshows and things of that nature is it invokes the public or the family to reminisce and to remember and think and, oh, I was there for that, or things of that nature. Is there anything that you could think of, and this might be a question statement for you, that would make your service, if you have one, personalized to you? And what I mean by that, we have had just about everything at our funeral home. I've had a riding lawnmower in the chapel. I've had a motorcycle. I've had a John boat, musical instruments, all of those things. And I love it when families allow us to do those kinds of things because it takes the element and raises it so that it's not so cookie cutter, for everyone. You can do those things. And don't let anyone tell you you can't. Another big one that folks always love to talk about, and it seems like I spend the most time just about when I'm making arrangements and so forth, is flowers. I'm not a flower fan myself, but my grandmother, when she passed away, she said that there better be more flowers than there is casket that was seen. So that's what we did for her. So if there's something that's specific to you or special to you, give that a thought. Another big one is an obituary. It is very helpful when you have thoughts written down regarding this, as far as family members to include. I have no idea who my great-grandmother was. So, write those things down. That way they're there for your children to kind of pull and snag and say, hey, Dad did this, so we'll kind of go on with it and expound upon it, and we'll make something that we can publish. Another good point that I had here was where is your service going to take place, if there is one? Is that going to be at your funeral home of choice? Is that going to be at your church? Is that going to be at a park? Is that going to be at your favorite bar, watering hole? Whatever the case may be. It's 2022, and we get the privilege to kind of do what we see fit these days, don't we? Yeah. So, let's see. Another big one is, are there any special honors that you would want to have for your service? And what I mean by that is, if you're a member of the armed forces, would we have military honors for the service? Or if you belong to a fraternity or a sorority, would they be coming in to do anything? Masonic rites. Another organization that's becoming really popular is what's called a Nightingale Tribute.
A what?
It's called a Nightingale Tribute.
Nightingale.
For our nurses. There's a wonderful team in the area that will come and do a little 5-minute presentation to honor nursing service. So there are all sorts of little things like that out there that are wonderful to have and very meaningful to the attendees of the service. Another idea to think about, should you have a funeral service and you're going to be buried and that sort of thing, pallbearers. Someone to carry you, that kind of thing. Oftentimes I ask that question, have you thought about pallbearers? And that's deer in the headlight look. We haven't thought about that. And so I always kind of like to make mention of that. So I believe there was a long list here, so I'm going to, is there anything else that you think we should have covered on that list?
Well, the thing
Jack?
about it is, and this is what I hear you saying, Jonathan, and this is really good, the funeral homes are pretty much open to what the family wants.
Absolutely. And if they're not, run.
Right. And the other part of that I'm hearing you say, if the family gets together and plans this, there's going to be no argument between the family members because it's already been planned. I've attended a lot of funerals, and I've helped plan a lot of funerals, and somebody comes up with something that wasn't mentioned, or I did one about 3 months ago, and they had an argument that they was going to do a cremation, and half the family said no way, and the other half the family said yes. So this is the good stewardship part that you're talking about in your preparation.
Getting those thoughts out
so that the family can just get along during this time, because this is a time to love each other and be a part of each other's lives.
Absolutely. There are many times where, and I'm sure you as a pastor have seen this before too, we go from our intended job of funeral directing or ministering to soccer referee or sometimes bailiff.
Yeah.
So it's very important, I think, to think about these things.
Yeah.
So in that event of your death, there is no question.
And Jonathan touched on this a minute ago, but he didn't go into it in depth. But if you've been a Christian all your life and you have a favorite verse and you want the pastor that's doing your eulogy to draw from that one verse, so be it. Write it down. Let them know that. And we pastors, we adapt to that. We a matter of fact, I use the person's Bible a lot of times if they would like that, I use their Bible in the pulpit when I do the eulogy.
I love that.
So it's important that those little things, and that's just a little thing, but Jonathan, you really hit on all that. But I think that as we prepare, we need to think of all those little things, because those little things can be big things later on. When you get through, you might sit back and say, I forgot that. I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have done this. And you know what? When you're going through grief, you don't want to sit there and say, I wish I would have done this.
Absolutely.
And that's why Jonathan being here today is so important, because we don't want you to go through that and say, I wish I would have done this. Yep.
And I said that there at the beginning. I hear it so often. I didn't know we could do that. And so I love breaking down the barriers. Mm-hmm.
So pretty much as we experience planning our own funeral or helping plan with mom or dad or someone else, Jonathan is telling us this morning, cover all your bases and make sure that you're covered. And I really appreciate you, Jonathan, coming and sharing that today and being a part of our 11:11. And this is an awesome series, and I just thank you for doing that. And I thank you for tuning in. Next Friday, we'll be looking at the financial part of the process, whatever you decide to do with the remains, whether that be cremation or whether that be a burial by sea, as Dave talked about last week. Whatever you're going to do, and I thought it was real interesting last night on the news. And we're almost out of time, but I saw where they had a special cremation through air and not through fire, and went into soil, and you put it in the nature, back in nature. Did you see that?
There's a lot of publications that are coming out about that sort of thing, and it seems to be popular over on the other side of the country.
Is it called something else, or what is it?
I believe it's agremation.
Agremation, okay.
We're calling that. It could catch on in the area.
Right.
It very well could.
But it takes a special equipment to do.
It does, in time too, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I just saw that on the news the other night, and it kind of caught my fancy that there's another way coming up. And how many more may come up before we pass away. But so if you put everything in writing, but here's the one good thing, and I'll close with this. You can always go back and change it if you want to change it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And that way it'll be at the funeral home that you're of your choice, and they will see that they follow through as much as possible. But the family needs to know, so they will follow those directions.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being with us, and we appreciate you and look forward to next week as we talk about finances. But just remember today, preparation. Thank you, Jonathan, for being with us today.
Pastor Gary.